in this country, there's a cultural thing about money where it's acceptable to say, oh, I'm hopeless at money. It's acceptable to say, I'm hopeless at numbers. And that's a cultural thing. In Asia, it's quite the opposite. It's very good to be good at numbers and to earn and to be on top of your money. It would have been really helpful if the school had taught me, certainly if my parents had taught me, not just how to not get into debt, but how to make money, how to earn money, how to, basic investing. If I'd understood that compound interest can make you serious money, I would have taken a lot more notice in maths classes. I really would.
It was a cool place to work. Anyway, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
There's a lot to talk about.
There really is, yes.
How big is the squeeze on people right now? Because you are one of those people that providing advice and guidance, and it's useful, but it's a shame they haven't to get this advice and guidance right now. Yeah,
it's funny because that was a question that I asked a debt advisor that I know last month. So in April, when we had the April bills, I phoned up a debt advisor that I know from Community Money Advice. I'm patron of Community Money Advice, which is a free debt advice charity, And I said, I bet it's going to be really hard for your clients. And he said, well, yes. On the one hand, I have got clients who are really struggling, and this is going to make it a lot worse. But he said, we've got a 2-tier benefits system. And I was quite surprised to hear him say that, because I thought he was going to go on about, how difficult it is. And he said, I've got people who are mostly sort of working people who are really struggling. Then on the other hand, I've got those that are doing actually very nicely out of the system. He mentioned one lady who's got 6 kids. She's on £66,000 on benefits, and that's tax-free. He was mentioning the PIP system. Now, I know people who are really struggling to get a car, and they really need it. Whereas he said he's had one lady who came in who's got a car because she said she feels anxious when she gets on the bus. Somebody else got a car because she's got acne and didn't want to go onto public transport with acne.
Hold on a second. Is this the thing you were telling me about?
Yeah. It's annoying, man. It makes me think, well, if they're doing it with what is our tax money anyway, why shouldn't I? I've got ADHD. I don't need to get a car, but if the government's going to pay for one anyway, I should do it.
Well, that's the thing. It's the system. Now, the lady who said she was anxious, it was a DWP person who'd been dealing with her case who said, do you feel anxious when you're on the bus? Because if you do, you'll get a car. And she went, oh, I feel anxious then. So it's the system. And as
I feel anxious on the bus.
Yeah, I know, it doesn't. Particularly when somebody's got their phone on speaker, that makes me feel a little more than anxious. But the system is working against the taxpayer and for those who want to use the system. It's really a problem, and it's going to get worse.
Well, Connor's my son, by the way.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah, and he brought it up to me the other day because he's bought a car with his own money.
Yep.
He's working hard. For his dad, who gives him a hard time, but he works very hard.
Yeah. And
every month he has to make the payment, and he doesn't miss it. He knows if he misses it, what problems it will cause to his credit rating, and he's playing by the rules.
Yeah.
And he said about this, he said, well, I have ADHD. I know they're giving cars to people. He's like, could I? And I was like, well, you're not going to, because we're not that. But,
no.
But the fact that it exists, how many cars, you touched a lot. Was it something like 90% of new car registrations or something ridiculous?
Yeah, 90% of new car registrations last year were on that scheme.
Can you fact check that? Because it's so unbelievable.
It is. I had no idea it was that big.
I want to find out if that's true. But it's funny because I think everywhere things are being gamed. I was talking to Anne Widdecombe this morning, so sorry to anyone who heard this already, but we've got a real problem of crackheads and drunks on the high street where we live in Bedford. It's a real problem, and they're making people's lives a misery, and they're robbing from the shops. I went to speak to somebody I know works for the police, and he said they don't arrest the drug dealers anymore, the street drug dealers, like the little hood rats. He said, we don't arrest them anymore because they know how to game the system. Once they're arrested, they say they're victims of modern-day slavery and they're being forced to do this. If they're forced to do this, whilst they're on remand, they will have a meeting with the Salvation Army. If the Salvation Army says, yes, they are a victim of modern-day slavery, they then become a victim. And then as a victim, they get issued can get issued a house, somewhere to live, and then they start selling drugs from the house. And it feels like we've built up is all these giveaway incentive structures, all these different incentive structures that people know how to exploit. And then all the people who are playing by the rules are getting screwed.
Yes, well, exactly. And increasingly screwed, because those who are playing by the rules, on the whole, are paying tax. And those taxes are going up, and they're going to continue to go up because they're going to have to, because we are spending out so much in various benefits. And when I say benefits, I include state pension, and that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger because we have more and more people who are living longer, and they have every right to have the state pension, but the state pension is going up. We've got more people taking it, and you've got all the other extra benefits, the cost also of the NHS. We've got huge outlays and not nearly enough money coming in, and this government, at least, their answer to it is to increase taxes. But as we're already seeing, increasing taxes is not helping, because the rich people, and increasingly the sort of fairly well off, not particularly rich, they're leaving. They're just thinking, why bother?
Well, I can give you 2 points of reference on that. Every single rich person I know, literally every single rich person I know, I don't know a lot, but is leaving.
Yeah.
They're going to Dubai, Portugal. A lot are going to Dubai. Somebody the other day, I'll tell you about Conors, just told me they're moving to Dubai. One of the people said to me, he said, I don't mind paying tax. What I don't want to see is it going up and being wasted. I don't want to see it going up and see lawlessness on the streets.
Exactly.
And people taking the piss. So that's true. But also, one thing I feel personally is that running businesses is hard. And I already, I run a couple.
Yeah.
The taxes going up are a squeeze on our profits. But you throw into that new minimum wage, new employment laws, there's a big squeeze between what we bring in and what we send out. And this profit margin is getting smaller and smaller. It has a double incentive. One, can I be bothered to continue this business anymore? Why work so hard to not make any money? Secondly, I can't be bothered to start any new businesses. And me and Conor, every day, we're walking up and down and saying, we could put a burger restaurant there, we could put a pizza restaurant there. And we're like, what is the point?
What is the point?
What is the point?
And that's the way I feel as well, because I run businesses, as you know. I run moneymagpie.com. That's Money Magpie Limited. Every month you think, tax, you've got to pay the tax and national insurance, or you've got some corporation tax, or you've got the VAT, whatever. Just when you think you're making it's gone in tax. And I have people getting in touch, I've got readers and people who are on my social media saying things like, I'm taking early retirement because I can't be bothered. I had one guy who works in the city. He got some bonuses, a lot of bonuses last year, whatever, made £500,000. Nice. But half of that went in tax. And he said, as soon as I get enough in my pension, I'm off. I'm going to stop. It's just going to stop working, because what is the point? And when, as you say, entrepreneur types who have ideas for businesses are thinking, I'd do that, but what's the point?
What's the point?
You've got a problem. We've got a problem with society when that happens.
And it gets even worse. It gets even worse because to even make a profit, then we have to raise our prices.
Yeah.
But when we raise our prices, we have less customers.
Yes.
I had it today. So I have a bar as well. And the bar, it does okay. We only open Friday, Saturday. And I was looking at the bank account this morning. I'd paid for all the new supplies in. Yeah. It was like 11 grand in there because we've just reopened. We just refurbed. I was like, that's nice. And my accountant sent me a bill. Oh, here's your HMRC bill. It's £4,500. I was like, okay, so that's cut in half again.
Yes.
And I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when.
No, exactly.
And I'm like, it's all I see is I actually don't mind supplier bills. I quite like supplier bills because I want to help other companies. Tax,
exactly.
tax.
Yes.
And what do we get? I don't use the NHS unless it's an emergency. We have private medical. We don't use the school system. We're not using any part of the system.
Too. Yeah.
But even the bits we want to use are crap. I had someone driving to the back of my car. That part of their light went into my exhaust. I took a photo of their car. They drove off, by the way.
Yeah.
I took a photo of their broken light with their number plate, and I had the bit of their light, which was the perfect shape of the bit that was broken. So I sent this to the police. They said, there's not enough evidence. And I was like, why?
What more do you want, really?
Why carry on?
Yeah, exactly. And in the taxi coming here, my taxi driver, and this is admittedly fairly typical of the taxi driver, he said, well, it's all the illegals coming in. They're taking it all. Now, they're not.
They're not.
They're really not. But that is the view. And And I think, the problem that the Labour Party has, and certainly the Tories had, is that they don't realise that this is what most people are thinking. Really, the vast majority of the country is seeing illegals coming in. And it is actually small amounts, really, in the grand scheme of things, but it looks like a lot. And they are seeing a lot of them getting given somewhere to live. They're being given extra money, etc. And they really do feel that if we stop that, then everything would be all right. The NHS would be saved, blah, 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 which, of course, it wouldn't. It's okay, it's a few billion that costs us, but, compared to the NHS, which costs us, 192 billion, it's nothing, really. But from a
it's
societal,
a useful boogeyman.
It is a useful boogeyman, but I do think that there is mileage in the government saying, right, we're really going to stop this. Look, we are stopping this, and we are going to we're giving money to the British homeless. We're not just homing people who have just come in. These are things that people see, and that really upsets them. And if they could sort that a little bit out, then they could go, right, now we've still got a problem. What do you suggest we do? Because we will still have a problem.
So just want to say it's 20%, not 90%. So it's 20% well off.
But
even 5 cars.
But even that is massive. 1 in 5 cars is being bought by the government, essentially. Yeah. How many cars is that?
So it was about 800,000 cases last year.
Cases of
this scheme. This scheme went through 800.
And what's the average price of a car?
Well, this is the thing. On there, it's like there's BMW M4s and stuff. Who needs that?
Wow.
Well, some people, if you might get anxiety in a Ford Focus. It sends me mad.
Yes,
it sends me. I don't even know how we've got here, but we have I feel like we have a completely broken system everywhere I look.
Yes, but it's not just in this country. I think that the West, and I include Australia and Japan in that, the West is broken in large measure. We've once you give people things, you can't take them away again, and that's the problem. When you look at France tried to put through a few, I would say, relatively small, very sensible changes, cuts in their budget.
Paris.
Yes, they tried to do it, and the whole government collapsed on it. I think they were trying to improve their pension system. People retire at about 60 in France. It's going up to 67 here in a few years' time, and so they wouldn't have that. And we are getting to the point, I think, where we're going to have some sort of financial crash across the West, not just in this country, but across the West. Because until things really crash, really get bad, any government that tries to take stuff away is going to collapse, because people do not like to have things taken away from them.
Well, they voted for more of it in Australia and Canada right now. I don't think we're going to, and we'll get on to that, but they have voted for more of it. But I was out when we were in Argentina, Kurt, about a year and a half ago. Yeah, we went to Argentina.
Yeah.
Which has insane levels of inflation.
Oh, yes.
Insane levels of inflation. But by the way, weirdly, you don't notice it when you get there. Inflation isn't something you see. You have to be told about it, because you go to Starbucks, there's people in Starbucks. The restaurants, they're full.
Yeah.
But they were explaining to me is that it can get a lot worse before people complain about it.
Yes.
Because of the way voting works.
Yes.
Because there's so many people who rely on government that they can keep government in power, keep giving things away. He said it really took something special, Millet coming in, to really communicate something different. But I'm like, how bad is it going to get? Because I swear, every direction, everything's broken.
Yeah, it is. I interviewed the former MP, Steve Baker.
Oh, no, Steve, he's been here.
Yes, he's a lovely man, and he was saying that he feels we've got about 14 years left of government money. And basically, he used numbers from the OBR, and he worked out, he's got some graphs, money coming in from tax going down, money having to go out in benefits, etc. And there comes a point in about 14 years' time when it all crashes. Personally, I think it's going to be earlier, really, because again, this government is giving away even more. They're trying to cut. They've had a big problem cutting the fuel payments for the pensioners, etc. That's caused them big problems. I don't know. I think there are good reasons to do that, but I don't know why they did that first off. That doesn't seem like a clever move. Again, from a PR point of view, it doesn't seem like a clever move to me. But there we are. But at some point, there literally will not be the money. And at that point, whoever is in government, I think, and this is sort of my logic, which may not work out, but I think that whoever's in government is going to have to go to the country and go, this is how much we do not have. This is how much we are obligated to spend. We cannot cover this. You tell us where we should do the cuts. That's what I would do. If I were in government, I'd say, yeah, here we are. Here are the figures. You tell us who's going to have the cuts. Is it going to be the state pension? Is it going to be the NHS? Is it going to be education? Is it going to be benefits for the poor? What were you going to do?
I don't think it's hard to fix, though. I don't.
Right? How
I really
would you do
don't
it?
Because so I looked. I mean, our tax receipts are about $1 trillion, and we're spending about 1.1, maybe it's 1.15 trillion. So we're going over budget 10 to 15%. So I think the cuts need to be more than 10 to 15% because I think we need to lower taxes to drive business incentives. But I mean, my starting point would be just to go and look at the big ticket items and force departments. If we need a 30% cut, I don't know, cut every department by 40%.
Yeah.
Just slash it.
Just do it. Yes.
Just slash through it and start again. I was talking yesterday with my son. I said, very occasionally I go to my bank and go to my direct debits, and there's a bunch I don't even know what they are, and I just cancel them all and I wait till people complain and go, oh yeah, I need that and I don't need that.
Yeah, that's good.
I think if you got rid of 50% of government,
nobody would notice.
I don't think they would.
Yeah, because government has gone bigger and bigger, and I don't know how that happens because they've become more and more inefficient. I mean, 100 years ago we had very few civil servants, and now it's all civil servants, it seems. And I've been dealing with my local council recently, and they are by no means one of the worst councils. And I've been talking to people who literally cannot describe what they do as a job. I say to them, "What do you do?" "Well, I'm supporting this." No, but what do you do day to day? "Well, I'm sometimes," and they're often off for whatever reason, So that's just one little local council. It's all over the country, and all the departments got people who do nothing, really.
So how much pressure are people under? Because I know people's circumstances are different. And weirdly, I feel like last year was worse than this year. There's been a rebalancing. I just see it with my businesses. Yes. I saw the numbers. They weren't great last year. We're back a bit better this year. Well,
inflation has, in theory, gone down. I say in theory because I don't honestly believe a lot of the figures that come out of the ONS, the Office of National Statistics. I mean, as we know, they changed the basket of goods for good reasons and also bad, I consider. So, they say, oh, inflation's flattened off. And I think, really? I look at my shopping basket and I think, is it not according to my shopping basket? But I think generally things have stopped going up so vertiginously this year, which has made things a little bit easier. But my feeling is that when you hear middle earners and sort of middle upper earners going, it's a bit tricky, we're going to have to cut this, we're going to have to cut that. There's a general sense of worry, even with people who are earning fairly decent amounts. For a start, they are more and more worried about tax, like we've been saying. They're worried about an inheritance tax. I know a couple of people who are in their, 70s, 80s, who are moving house because of inheritance tax. So that's sort of not like, problems day to day, but I'm hearing more from people who are not going out as much. They're not doing this as much, not doing that. They're a bit concerned. They're bothered by the gas and electricity bills, of course, the water bills. Don't get me started, and council tax as well. Again, like you say, they're saying my council tax has gone up by 40%. Am I getting better and anything better? No, it's worse actually because they're not collecting the bins, etc. So this is what's sort of swirling around among a lot of the people that I know and that I talk to through my business and through social media.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines, the world's most responsible currency, the right way. Because the future depends on it.
How about at the very bottom end, the people who are struggling the most? And I will get onto the middle class, but how is it for the people of the poorest end of society?
Yeah.
Is it getting impossible to live, impossible to feed, to heat?
Well, for some people, yes, absolutely. I mean, again, you've got the sort of the two-tier ones that
The ones playing by the rules.
Yes, the ones playing by the rules. I've got a friend; she's a single parent. She works all the time. She's on universal credit. It's a constant balancing act with universal credit, because you can do this, but you can't do that. And
How do you mean?
Well, you can earn a certain, because universal credit helps with if you're actually earning money at the same time, but you can only earn a certain amount. So you mustn't earn more than a certain amount, because otherwise you're going to lose your universal credit.
They don't scale it.
Yeah, they sort of do scale it, yes, but that's the thing. It
sounds like a trap.
It kind of is. Yeah, I mean, this is a problem though with all benefits. Essentially, are a trap, because you have to be a certain level of poor to get them. And you might actually want to work X amount, but you have to watch it, because if you do work more, then you will lose not only the money that you're getting in benefits, but also the extra freebies like free school meals and, free this and that. So you have to kind of balance it. I can't think of a way that you can really do benefits in a way that will totally work. You can do it in a way that will work for a lot of people, but it's really difficult, I think, for any government to create a benefit system that will stop the poor getting really poor, but also not put people off working at all, or working as much as they could do and probably should do.
Is there any credit you can give to the idea that this is a bit more sinister? There's like an idea of keeping people poor, so they are subservient and they vote for you.
Well, there's certainly a sense of that with universal basic income.
Right.
I mean, I've talked to various MPs. I mean, like Steve Baker, like Steve Webb. There are some. I've known some good ones. I interviewed John Prescott years ago.
Great.
And this was before he was Home Secretary, and I was really impressed by his ideas. And there are a lot of MPs who genuinely want to help, and they want to make things better, and they're very concerned, etc. So I don't think that across the board. I think there probably are a few who have this sort of overarching idea of keeping people down, but a lot of MPs, they really do want to do the best. But I think universal basic income as a concept, I think that absolutely is to keep everybody down, and to stop them coming up with the pitchforks and beating down the gates of the billionaires. That's the idea.
But it's kind of happening anyway now, because we've had this tax the rich, tax the billionaires idea floating around. I've seen politicians promote it. I've seen Gary Stevenson promote it.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people promoting this idea, despite the fact in every country that's tried it has failed.
Yes.
They're promoting it, and they're demonizing wealthy people.
Yeah.
And I don't like it.
No.
Even if somebody inherited it, somebody else went out and earned it.
Yes, true. Yeah.
And if we demonize these people, you're demonizing the wealth creators, and they'll just leave. What?
Doesn't make any sense, does
No.
it? But I think what isn't done enough is dealing with the big companies. And I mean, I do get angry with Amazon, Google, Facebook, etc. These. I mean, there's many reasons to get angry with them anyway. But their refusal to pay any tax is part of it. Well, refusal to pay much tax at all. That's why they're in Ireland or Luxembourg or wherever they can be, and they're selling things in the UK, but they're actually paying tax somewhere a long way away that doesn't really charge them much. So that sort of thing I do have a problem with. But
that's a licensing system. So they go to a low tax jurisdiction, and then the UK will have a license, which is the profits.
Exactly. So that is really annoying. That really gets my goat. But anything that, as you say, demonizes making money, growing businesses, etc., is stupid, just stupid. And it's against human nature. And I find this with quite a lot of governments, and I mean particularly the government that we have at the moment. They don't get human nature, that if you demonize that, or if you make make it harder and harder to earn, where you're working and you're constantly paying tax, it's human nature to go, well, I just won't, but I'll leave, or I'll just stop working, or whatever, because why should you? Why should you carry on? And then you have a domino effect, of course, as you know, because if the people at the top are saying, I'm not going to be bothering with this business anymore, then the people who work for them suddenly have to find more work. But if loads of people are giving up their businesses, there isn't the work, etc. So they end up being in the civil service and just taking money and doing nothing.
Do you think this current government, which I'm very critical of, but I'm also very critical of the previous Conservative government. Do you think it's ideological, or do you think they're just plain stupid? Because what I can't understand is there's no one any business experience on the front bench. Every decision they've made, they've been warned against the implications. The implications have been proven true in terms of lower growth and. They talked about there would be no taxes on working people, but they raised national insurance, which is a tax on working people. So they've been proven wrong pretty much every step since they've come into power. They are ringing the bell of NHS waiting list time down. We know what they're up to. But these people are just fundamentally too stupid to be doing the jobs they're doing.
Honestly, it does seem like it. And this is certainly what I felt before they even got in. The people that were standing, you thought, no, really? Seriously? I mean, I have been saying for years, and it's not popular, but I do think that MPs should be paid a lot more than they are.
I agree.
And certainly
like
the Prime Minister. Yes. I mean, pay peanuts, you get monkeys.
Yeah.
And it's a miserable job. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I wouldn't do it, frankly. But if they paid twice what they're paying now, which is probably, closer to what it should be, then you might just get some people who are intelligent, people who, as you say, they've run businesses, they know how the world works. That could be better. But, what we've got at the moment is a joke. And I think it's a mixture of ideology and stupidity. The net zero nonsense, for example. How intelligent is it to insist that we all have solar panels, to take up prime farmland with solar panels and insist that all new builds have solar panels on the roofs and then block the sun? You just think, really? I joined up thinking, I don't know. So I would say it's a mixture of ideology and just plain thickness.
Well, we probably have a job then to explain basic economics to the voting public.
Yes.
Because, again, if we drive away millionaires, at least your taxes going up. So there's no point demonising them. Just get into the real world with that.
Yeah.
If we want to drive growth, then we can't do that by raising taxes.
No.
And I think ultimately a lot of people are voting for things that are making it worse off for them, but they're convinced it's the other way around. Like if we have more borrowing, if government just prints more money, great, this should be good for us, but actually that drives inflation, that hurts the poorest the most. I think we have a job to educate the public on basic economics, because I don't think many people understand it.
No, and you can tell with personal finance, which is, a branch of economics, that's what I do. And the reason I've done this for 20 years or so is because most of us, including myself, we're not taught basic economics, home economics. We're not taught personal finance. And therefore, we are, on the whole, way poorer than we need to be. In fact, what I've done now, I run moneymagpie.com and I set it up originally as a sort of catch-all sort of personal finance, everything from getting out of debt to investing, because I felt, well, that's, the life journey. Now we're particularly concentrating on investing because The World and His Wife is a personal finance expert, allegedly. But nobody much is talking about investing in a way that people can understand. And I do feel that if we could, get a handle on just the basics of, not spending too much and saving, and then get a handle on investing and understand how it means that your money grows while you sleep, then a whole load of social problems would be, sorted out, because we, our individual selves, would be managing our money in a way that we could, cope with. And we'd also see how we're being screwed by the, banks, by the financial companies, and also certainly by the authorities, all the money that's being taken out. Because it's people who are earning that go, oh, hold on a minute, look what all this tax that we're being charged. People who are not earning, they don't care about the tax, and they just want the benefits, thank you.
Do people generally understand the difference between money and assets?
No.
They don't.
No, I really don't think so, actually. I mean, a lot of people don't know what asset means anyway. And that's when I do courses, I do workshops on how to manage your money. And I talk about having your money in different asset classes. Like, do you know what an asset class is? And very few people do. So, there's a very basic lack of knowledge. Again, the debt advisor that I was speaking to last month, he said, and we're all saying, we're all singing this same hymn sheet. He said, we've got to have training in personal finance, because that lady who was getting £66,000, who is getting £66,000 a year, she had come to him for help because she wasn't managing. And, her kids are getting free school meals. She's getting all these other benefits, but she was in debt. So, and he said, we've got to have more financial literacy education. We've just got to have, because, it's a nonsense when you're on 66 grand and you're not coping. Come on.
Have you included Bitcoin in your investing?
I have. Yes, I'm a big fan of Bitcoin. Bitcoin and gold are my big things at the moment. In fact, I did a webinar last week saying, Bitcoin or gold, which is the best investment? Basically both. As I say, I think there are arguments for both. I actually had somebody you'd be interested in, Charlie Morris, who runs a fund called Bold, which is Bitcoin and gold.
Interesting.
Get that, Bitcoin, gold, Bold. Yeah. And it's about 2/3 gold, currently 2/3 gold, 1/3 Bitcoin, and it's returning about 14%. It's so.
Over the last year, gold's really performed well.
Very well, absolutely, and it's likely to continue because of the central banks, just hoarding it.
Well, gold does well when governments know we're fucked.
Yes,
because they buy it.
Yes, exactly.
They buy it.
It's not a good place to be.
No.
Having high and. I had one guy, my friend John Butler, who's written books about gold. He's a former fund manager, and he said said this a few years ago to me, that gold should be about $20,000 per troy ounce. So it's about $3,000 at the moment. But he said you don't want to live in a world where that is the case, frankly.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of bits about Bitcoin then, if you're covering it, because this show was, for the first 860 episodes, was a Bitcoin show.
Oh, was it? Oh, great.
For 7-8 years, it was just Bitcoin. We flipped it. Sometimes we bring Bitcoin up and people are like, why do you keep talking about Bitcoin?
Because it's important.
Yeah, no, it is important. I think a lot of people misunderstand it. But do you only cover Bitcoin? You don't bother with all the shitcoins and nonsense?
You see, and I was thinking about this actually, because I've got a friend, I'm sure you know Susie Ward.
Of course.
Yes, and she says that, she's absolute Bitcoin maximalist, and I do understand that. However, I am one of those people shouted at, go, kind of like XRP.
No. No, those people are evil.
Yeah, that's what she says.
They fund anti-Bitcoin campaigns, misinformation campaigns.
Do they really?
Yeah, so they funded a Greenpeace campaign, but that was just, I think it was about 5 million they put into it. Conor will fact check.
Really?
Funding a misinformation campaign saying like Bitcoin is boiling the polar bears and the oceans.
Nonsense.
Yeah, so some people obviously make good money on it. Make good money on crap. But
absolutely you can. Yes.
It took me about a year and a half to become the maximalist like Susie, and now my view is when you price every asset in Bitcoin, Bitcoin is the best asset you could own. I think the only thing that beat it was Nvidia shares over a certain period for obvious reasons.
Not anymore though, I would imagine.
No, not recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the reason I always say Bitcoin only is because on a long enough time frame, everything fails against Bitcoin because it is the best crypto asset.
Right.
It has the most honest distribution. Yes. And the price charts just tell you that. But I'm a big supporter of Bitcoin. Every business I have accepts it, retains the Bitcoin, doesn't spend it.
But does your bank allow this? My bank, for my Money Magpie, but I've got with various banks, but the one that I'm with Money Magpie, every year it rings me up, go, see you deal with some Bitcoin company, you deal with eToro and you deal with CoinJar. Are you selling Bitcoin? No, we're not. No, it's advertising,
I can tell you some stuff on that. So Lloyd's closed my account. I would with Lloyd's for about 20 years, and I got a phone call. And somebody said, I need to ask you about some transactions. I was like, fine. What is it? And they asked me about a couple of transactions, went to exchange. And I said, do I have to tell you this? And they said, no. I was like, well, look, I'm a grown man. I've got no debt apart from my mortgage. I've got 2 children and some businesses. I don't know who you are. It's none of your business.
Yes.
I got a letter 2 days later saying your account will be closed in 2 weeks. So I went to TransferWise.
Oh, yes.
They said you cannot send money to Bitcoin companies. That's fine. I just needed something to run my company. Because I don't generally buy Bitcoin for my companies. The Bitcoin we accept, we just keep and retain.
Okay.
And I got paid by a company who are a Bitcoin company as a sponsorship contract. They closed my account down. Then
that was TransferWise,
TransferWise, just because what they do is it gets, I mean, you know this running a company, that it's quite invasive sometimes.
Yes, it is. Yeah. How dare they?
So I had an invoice where the money came in to be paid, and they said, we're not going to pay it yet. Can you please send us a copy of the contract and the invoice? I was like, what? But I did. And then they saw it was for a crypto company, so they closed it down. I even said to them, I've not broken your terms.
No.
Your terms are if I send money to the exchange. And then who was the one after that? It was one of the newer banks, Starling, I think.
Okay,
But I've been with Revolut now.
Okay.
Revolut, great. I can send and receive, and they're fine.
Yes, so
they're
that's
still
something.
nosy, but I think that's because of government legislation. But Connor, bring that back up, by the way. I just want you to see this.
Oh, yeah.
Ripple's long history of anti-Bitcoin marketing. Remarkably, Ripple has a long history of attacking Bitcoin. Its co-founder, executive chairman, Chris Larsen, has been a vocal advocate for shifting Bitcoin's consensus mechanism from proof of work to proof of stake, which would be a terrible idea. You want proof of work.
Yes,
you want the expenditure of energy to produce Bitcoin.
Yeah.
In March 2022, Larsen personally funded a £5 million Greenpeace USA campaign called Change the Code, aimed at pressuring Bitcoin developers and prominent industry figures to alter Bitcoin's mining protocol. That's an attack on Bitcoin.
Yes.
Bitcoin must have proof of work. I don't know. Do you know about proof of work?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so it must have proof of work.
Yes.
It absolutely must. We want this energy expenditure by the miners. We need this. And so, I mean, I think they're fundamentally evil people.
That's interesting.
Fundamentally evil
people.
Same, yeah, Susie's hardcore.
Yes, she is. She's good. Yes. But Susie, she has a good idea about using Bitcoin production, Bitcoin mining to help green energy. Because of course, you know, one of the big scandals about wind power, for example, is they spend loads of money stopping the windmills. But she said with Bitcoin mining, you could keep them going. You wouldn't have to have that.
No, she's completely right.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin miners, they compete to find the lowest price energy possible.
Of course, yes.
You know, if you're paying 10 pence in, I don't know, in
Bedford.
Well, in Bedford, 10 pence in Bedford, and you can get it for half a penny per megawatt in El Salvador. You go and mine in El Salvador because you're expending so much power. It makes a huge difference. So they want for the cheapest power possible. They've done this out quite successfully out in Texas, in that they've integrated Bitcoin mining into the grid. But essentially, what we found is about $1 billion a year that's being curtailed. I think Conors probably already found it. But in the UK, we curtail $1.2 billion a year of curtailment. And I'm not sure if that's energy we just waste or we to pay. Is it when we pay them to turn off?
Could be both.
Yeah.
But yes, yeah.
But if you turn around to the Bitcoin miners, they would say, yeah, we'll put our machines here. We'll buy all of that off you. You know, we want a discount. We'll buy all of you. And that money would go to waste. But you could go to an Ed Miliband and you could explain this to him. You could say, we can generate hundreds of million pounds for you right now. It will cost you nothing. It would lead to less waste. It would make your wind mining operations more economical so you can expand. He's going to say no because the word Bitcoin to him means something scary.
Well, same with the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. You would think that they would go, oh, yes, we're absolutely on top of all of this and we want Britain to lead the world in something, you know, and if we put money into this and accept all this and tell banks it's all right, we could be, but no, they're just damping down everything, and this I think is why the banks are all going, oh, Bitcoin, oh no, we're not touching it.
I think Steve Baker was the first person to raise it in Parliament.
Oh, was he? Good for him. I should mention that.
I think it was about 2014. Yeah. We saw this video of a young Steve Baker asking questions about. I think it was crypto assets and specifically Bitcoin, wasn't it? He did a great job, but unfortunately, Bitcoin has this brand problem, and I think its brand problem's twofold. They've been told it's bad for the environment, it's used by terrorists and paedophiles, which is just demonstrably not
Nonsense,
true.
Yeah.
But also, everyone thinks they're too late.
Yes. Same with gold. Everyone thinks they're too late, and they're absolutely not. And I mean, as you know, one of the reasons why gold is doing so well is because of central banks, and now there's talk in some central banks, some governments, of having Bitcoin reserves. The Czech Republic, they're talking about it, whether they will.
I think they had a vote and it failed.
Yes,
though.
but the fact is they're talking about it. At some point it's going to get gradually louder, and I think we should have Bitcoin reserves. We should have a lot more gold reserves than we've got, but we should.
Microsoft board had a vote. Again, it failed. But the fact that Microsoft board sat down and voted upon it, and they'll regret it in 4 years' time. They'll be like, shit, we should have done it.
We should have done it. Yeah.
We actually, our government owns something like 60,000 Bitcoin.
Because the ones that it took from criminals, etc. Yes, good for them.
And so the push is to lobby them to not sell it, because the fear is they look at the price of the 60,000 Bitcoin they own. And it, by the way, every time a government sells its Bitcoin reserves, whether it was, I think Belgium did it and Germany did it, they always regret it.
Of course.
But they have in the US, they have established their reserve.
Yeah.
David Bailey, my friend who runs BTC Mag, got in with the Trump campaign and worked with them to explain to them, like, you sold, I don't know, whatever it was, 100,000 Bitcoin when they were worth £100 or $100, and now they could be worth this. You should be sitting on this as a stockpile.
Good.
Because you can leverage it against your debt eventually.
Well, absolutely.
But I think there's a push in the UK to do something similar. But I wish, it's really sad, but like our football team is essentially the Bitcoin team. That's who we are. That's
Real Bedford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you've seen it. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and it's been really good for our football club. Who have, good sponsors. But other football fans always mock us, and they mock the Bitcoin thing. Like, they sing songs about it.
They can.
But I always think, the shame is if only you understood.
Yeah.
I'd love to sit down with you, talk to me about your personal financial situation. If there are challenges, I wish you understood this. I wish you just put a little bit by, because again, in 10 years' time, it will probably be your best performing asset.
Absolutely. And it's that little bit by, isn't it? Because this is kind of what I've always tried to get across, not just with Bitcoin and crypto, but just any investing. It's just a little bit here, a little bit there, and just quietly, don't make a fuss about it. You just, pound cost averaging, as they say, put a little bit every month. Sometimes it's going to be high, sometimes it's going to be low. But if it's you just regular, like your bowel movements, make your investments a regular thing. And then after a few years, you go, oh, that's interesting. I've actually got some cash, and it's more than I expected. And certainly with Bitcoin, suddenly it's just going to go like that. I know.
Do you find with your website, I'm assuming if it was my business, I would be looking at the stats every day. Does yours respond to the financial crisis? Is it sadly that's the...
Well, yes, certainly there is that element, although there are lots of other elements as well. I mean, sometimes if the weather's nice, people they're not online, but yes, certainly we did see when it was financial crisis, when it was in the news all the time, people were constantly looking for debt help or help with savings, help with bills, that sort of thing. And then, of course, gold. Again, when gold is in the news, we do have a lot of people looking for gold. Bitcoin's gone a bit quiet, but, it'll go up again. So we'll have a lot of crypto interests, as soon as things get bigger in the news.
Very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
Are these debt situations that people find themselves in, are they always solvable? Is there always a way out for them?
Well, yes. I mean, ultimately, there is always a way out, and I always say to people, if it's got so bad, do go and get yourself some free help in one of the debt charities, because there's nothing they haven't seen. Quite often, that help, it could be bankruptcy, which is not the end of the world. None of it is the end of the world now. You can be bankrupt, as and a year or so later set up a business. So. It's a much more fluid thing now than it was. It's still horrible. I'm not downgrading it at all, but there are always ways out. Even if you're going to have your house taken away from you, you've got charities like Shelter, which can help, particularly if you go to them sort of early on. They can often help you keep the roof over your head. So there is help out there. It's just it can take a while to get it sometimes, because there are a lot of people who need that help.
But surely once they get the help, it relieves a lot of pressure.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, one of the reasons why I went into this is because I was in debt back when was it? End of the 90s. I had about 10 grand worth of debt. And it sort of suddenly happened, and I just thought, how did I do this? And I thought, oh yeah, I was spending. I've always worked for myself. I thought, oh yeah, I use my credit card, and I did spend that. Okay, I did up my flat at the time, and I spent way more than I should have done, and then suddenly it all sort of became very clear that I had to just work solidly, not spend any money at all, and then just put any money I made into paying off the debt. But I remember not wanting to look at my bank statements because it's all minus,
Yeah.
and you just don't want to do it. And so, I didn't have bailiffs at the door or anything, but if it's got really bad, I think you need to have some help from somebody. Either it's somebody who's really kind and supportive, or if you don't have that, somebody from a debt charity who can go, okay, you give it to me, right, we're going to do this, 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 and this. And those people are there. I think we should, use them as much as possible, definitely.
Well, credit cards are very
dangerous.
Scary, very dangerous. I remember my first one.
Mm-hmm.
I remember leaving university. I already had university debt. I remember going to the bank and opening my first bank account. And not long after, I got a thing for a credit card. I want a credit card. I was like, yeah, I'll have a credit card. This seems cool and grown up. Mm-hmm. You get points, and points go towards your flights. And very quickly, I think within a couple of months, I'd maxed out. I think I had a holiday and bought some clothes. Just felt like, I can just have this money and not worry about it. I very quickly maxed out a second credit card, and then got to a point I was like, okay, I've got a lot of debt here. And it took years to pay it off. I was only young. But I think they're dangerous.
Yeah, I think of them as like sharp knives, because if you're a chef, you need sharp knives. It's essential, and they need the sharper the better. But you can do a lot of damage with a sharp knife. You can kill somebody, and it's the same with credit cards. You can't necessarily kill somebody, but they're useful if you know what you're doing. If you've got money coming in regularly, and if you're disciplined and you'll pay it off. So you say you can get points, you can get cash back, you get insurance on stuff that you buy over £100,000, over £100 and under 30 grand. So there are good reasons to have them, but they can also completely undermine your finances if you don't use them properly, and they can just make you bankrupt. Absolutely.
Are we generally quite poor at personal finance in the UK?
Shocking.
I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to have this book. It's it was a black and red, a big A4 black and red. And I used to remember he used to sit there. He'd write every number down. He'd keep track of everything.
Good for him.
He used to have his built-in society account, his savings account. I mean, he was good at it.
Yeah.
But I felt that was the norm.
No.
Oh, it wasn't the norm.
Not at all.
My dad was a weirdo.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember
Dad.
talking. Yeah, no, he's absolutely good for your dad. No, most of us haven't a clue. In this country, there's a cultural thing about money where it's acceptable to say, oh, I'm hopeless at money. It's acceptable to say, I'm hopeless at numbers. But it's not acceptable to say, oh, I'm useless at words. Can't read at all,
Yeah.
But you can say, oh, I'm just too unworldly to do money or numbers. And that's a cultural thing. In Asia, it's quite the opposite. It's very good to be good at numbers and to earn and to be on top of your money. And we need that cultural mindset, I think, because then perhaps we would have more parents learning. I mean, my parents, bless them, they didn't know much. My dad was worried about money and never talked about it. My mum didn't have much of a clue, never talked about it. So I grew up with very little knowledge. And as I say, it wasn't really until I got into horrible debt and I had suddenly realised I had to get sensible that I just got on with it and I taught myself. But it would have been really helpful if the school had taught me, certainly if my parents had taught me, not just how to not get into debt, but how to make money, how to earn money, how to, basic investing. If I'd understood that compound interest can make you serious money, I would have taken a lot more notice in maths classes. I really would.
Well, we weren't taught it. Did you do any personal finance at school? None.
No.
No chance.
No.
I actually tried to bring it up in maths once and they wouldn't have it.
Good old.
It's staggering, because after health and relationships, money is fundamental of our lives, And I always say, like in my workshops, that money should be basically where this seat is. It should be not something that you're constantly trying to get or worried because it's behind. It should be it should support your life. It should just be there. You put it in its place and it holds you up. But it's not going to unless you yourself are sitting on it, that you know where you've put it in its place and it's sitting there supporting where you are. And most of us have no hope of that.
It's strange we don't teach it, and I'm suspicious of why we don't teach it, because we teach relationships,
yes.
we teach inclusivity. We teach a lot of things which aren't history, maths, English anymore. They find time in the calendar for all this. But why haven't schools found time to teach personal finance? I'm suspicious.
Yeah, no, understandably. I think partly because teachers are useless at their money. It's really blind leading the blind. But I do know of quite a few people, and I'm one of them, that are developing teaching materials which shouldn't be that difficult for teachers to use. And I can only, as you say, assume that it's yet more harmful ideology that we have in the schools. As you say, you've got inclusivity. They're doing goodness knows what with still about transgender. They're talking, they're teaching all sorts of weird stuff, but not enough that's actually genuinely practical, including, I don't know, when I was at school, we had home economics.
Yep.
Now, I was taught by my mum how to cook, so I sort of would look at that and say, well, that's too easy. But for a lot of people, that was useful. They don't seem to do that now in schools, which is a shame because people need to learn how to cook. Again, this is part of home economics, genuine economics. If you know how to cook, then you can budget much easier. You're not constantly going out to eat. And so that means you have a lot more money to play with, basic stuff.
I don't think I really understood money and assets until my very late 30s. I had a house and then I moved house.
Right.
And I knew that it kind of appreciated in value. Yeah. But I spent what I earned all the time. It was only when I started making the show about Bitcoin that I learned what money is, what good money is, bad money is. Yes. And then I started to realize, and then my first successful business had some money left over. I was like, well, I can't leave that in the bank because if I leave that in the bank, that's going to melt like an ice cube. Yeah. And started to learn about it. But I feel like you're probably ahead of me, Con. You've got some grounded principles on money, right?
Yeah. Are you a Gen Zer?
I have no idea what I am.
He's just turned 21.
Yes, you're Gen Z. Because Gen Zers are supposed to be much more clued up about a lot of things,
like
actually.
An insult there. I don't want to be one.
Do you have any foundational principles on money or investing? How do you think about it?
Probably very much like you do.
Yeah. Is that because of me?
Probably.
But you've probably got some Bitcoin, haven't you?
No, I lost it all in a boat.
Oh, no. Oh.
He's all right. He's just he's been told not to tell anyone.
Oh, quite right. Yes, no, absolutely, yes.
But you feel that hunger to get more Bitcoin, don't you? At least 100%. Accumulate it.
And whenever I have a bit too much in the bank, I'm not happy about it.
What about pensions? Do you believe in those? No, exactly. Most of the Gen Zs I know, pensions. No, I don't think so. And they'd rather have Bitcoin. And I understand it because pensions, they come and go, and it depends on the government. And also, increasingly, I don't like other people managing my money. I have a few things. I do have a pension. I've got a SIP, which is managed actually by a company run by a friend of mine, and we have a very similar view of life, and that helps. But I think the Gen Zers are rightly suspicious of a lot of organisations, a lot of fund managers, etc., and certainly governments. So they want to have more control, and I totally understand that.
I had a meeting with a pension advisor. I want to say I was about early to mid-30s. And he said to me, how much do you earn? And then how much do you think you need tax-free to live the lifestyle you want when you're retired? And I was like, 40,000 would be good. Have a couple of holidays, go for dinner most weekends. That'd be a good number. He said, right, you need a pension pot of 2.2 million. Yeah. You need to be putting away X. I was like, I haven't got even remotely anywhere near that. No. It's not even possible. Mm-hmm. And it made me realize whatever I put away is going to lead to a piddly pension because I didn't start it at Conors' age.
Yes.
But at the same time, then I did the math on the Bitcoin. I was like, if I just put this in Bitcoin, I will get a pension. And it has for me. Yes. Most people I know who've got Bitcoin don't have pensions. They give it a Bitcoin their pension.
Yes.
They're obviously hoping that it continues to
exactly.
to appreciate in value. Are there common mistakes people make with personal finance?
Oh yes. Well, one of them is giving it to somebody else to manage. It is a difficult one because there are good financial advisors, and there are not good financial advisors, and of course, before what's it called, RDR, you could get advice from your local bank, which was just sales, and that's why we had RDR, as they're calling it, where you can't have that. You can't have free advice because it's not advice, it's just sales. However, that has meant that for a lot of people, they either have to pay quite a lot per hour or per function for a financial advisor. And a lot of people don't really have the savings or the investments that would justify that kind of amount. Or they have to try and work it out for themselves, and nobody's getting the advice, or they haven't had the information, the education to do it for themselves. So quite a lot of the time, they just sort of give it to the bank or whatever, go, can you put that in a fund? And they just don't make enough money. And that sort of brings me on to a lack of appetite for risk. And this is a big one, I think, not just in this country. I mean, it's particularly clear in some other European countries where people don't want to take what they think is risk because they think they're going to lose their money. But when you go for non-risky things like cash, like, building society accounts, you're going to get a very poor return. And
maybe under inflation.
Yeah, you will lose money. And that's the thing. Even though it doesn't look like you're losing money, in real terms, you're going to lose a lot. So I try and explain risk and why risk is good and why you should have at least some risky assets just in order to get enough money to cope with inflation as you go forward.
Trajectory-wise, do you see a positive future?
Oh, yes. I mean, okay. I am positive.
What makes you optimistic about the future? Because I operate in both spaces. I have a pessimistic vision of the future and an optimistic vision of the future.
Yes, I'm the same, if I'm honest, yes. So, I think, it goes back to... I think it goes back to the fact that I'm a lifelong church-going Christian. So you see good. You see good as a fundamental. You see light as a fundamental of life. Certainly a spiritual life. So that is what pokes through every night. That's the ultimate. I think the ultimate of life is the good, the spiritual, the light. That's the truth. From a material point of view, it's looking pretty bleak. Yes, it is genuinely looking quite bleak. Certainly for the short to medium term. Again, I go back to the sort of the Christianity side. We've got rid of that in large measure in the West. And with that, we've got rid of a lot of the morality, a lot of the rules and laws on which our laws were originally founded. So when you get rid of a lot of the moral basis for life, the rules, the 10 Commandments, etc., you create a bit of a free-for-all in society. And you have that situation that we said at the beginning where you've got people who are living by the rules, who are doing quite badly, and then people who are just, using the system, just using greed and laziness, doing very nicely. And that, ultimately, that's not going to last. So I think in the short to medium term, we're going to have a lot of turbulence, a lot of darkness, a lot of unfairness, massive unfairness. But that ultimately has to destroy itself. It can't survive. Like I was saying, we're going to have a financial crash at some point. I don't see an alternative because that's the trajectory we've put us in. But once we have that financial crash, we're going to have to do something constructive about it because, otherwise you just sort of carry on like in caves, something will have to happen. So that gives me a sense of positivity as well.
So you're saying it almost like you think we need this financial crash to have the kind of reckoning.
It almost, I think again,
I don't think that's the worst idea in the world. No. It'd be awful for it to happen.
Yes.
But if we don't, we have this slow, gradual decline where everything gets worse.
Yes.
Which we all see and feel.
Yes.
And I kind of want to accelerate to the point where
you're forced to.
Yeah, forced to.
Yeah, well, that's what I feel about Trump in a way, because people have said to me, what do you think about what he's doing, the tariffs, et cetera, et cetera. And my feeling is that, like you say, the West has been on a slow, inexorable decline. And it's hard. And I'd rather have it sort of all broken up now. I'd rather, pull the Band-Aid off now, sort it out now, make things, difficult. So rather than this slow and just constantly depressing decline, when it comes to financial crash, I kind of feel that we need it. But then on the other hand, it's also because it just seems inevitable to me, because nobody is willing to say the facts and say, look, we are spending all of us, we're all spending too much. We're not making enough. We haven't got enough people working. Right now we've got 52% of the population taking, 48% paying in. That's literally not tenable. Yes, it's unsustainable. So
do you know how big the shift of that has been over, say, a certain period, like the last decade, 2 decades?
I don't actually. That's a good point. I think it's just in the last couple of years, really, 2-3 years. Well, I say that, lockdown did incredible damage to our economy. I mean, I was totally against lockdown. I still am. It makes me angry even saying the word. So I think, that just the last 5 years, things went down much, much more steeply because of lockdown, because of our lack of productivity. But I don't have the actual figures on that.
I fell for lockdown at the start.
Right,
I did, completely fell for it. And I was like, this sounds like a good idea. I'd interviewed a doctor who said how bad it was at his hospital. I was like, okay, it sounds like we need this. Obviously, you very quickly realise this isn't good.
No.
But where was it not obviously damaging? Where was it damaging but wasn't so obvious? Like, obviously closing down businesses is bad. But where else has it affected us?
Well, we've got, I think it's over 1 million young people of sort of graduate age who are just, they're not coping. They're not going out of their house. They're not working. They've some of them have graduated and they've just gone straight on to benefits because they cannot cope, or they say they cannot cope. So you've got that. You've got a lot of children. I don't know with the figures. Us For Them would know. The charity Us For Them would know. But there's a huge number of children who, again, have not gone back to school. Many of them cannot cope, or for one reason or another, their family just kept them out of school. They're not going back to school. So it's that sort of, I hate to say mental health because that's a term that's just bandied about all the time, but it has caused a major mental health problem, which of course is also an economic problem, because those children who have not gone back to school, they haven't had an education properly, most of them. We've got these young people who are not contributing to society, and they could be and they should be, but lockdown and the various things around that cause problems there. And then we have this, I mean, I work from home. My team, my Money Magpie team, will work from home. I'm not against working from home, but for most people I am. And we have this big problem, particularly again with the civil service. You can tell I'm not a big fan of civil service work.
I'm the same.
They don't want to go back to work, to the office, because that means actual work, the potential for actual work. So, again, that we could see that coming, because once you give people the ability to sit at home in their pants watching daytime TV rather than actually working, they're not going to want to give that up.
So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this, you can go and read the books, but the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com. Yeah, it's a bleak picture. Have we made it too easy for people to not work as well?
Yeah.
Because I think of Connor, you had this. We've both been out to Kenya at different points. Connor went and did 3 months work experience there. You don't have a choice of not working.
No.
There's very little welfare state.
Yes.
And I went to Ghana on the same trip, and everyone is on a hustle of some kind or another.
Right,
They're either working or they're buying bottles of Coke and they're going out on the street and selling. But you don't have a choice not to work unless someone's supporting you. And if you don't work, you have nothing. There might be some charities, but and I like the fact we live in a country that does help the people and most unfortunate. But I think we've gone beyond that now.
Yeah.
We're helping anyone. Again, I think the mental health thing, I think, is being gamed as well.
Yeah, big time.
Because you know what to say to not have to work. You stay at home and play computer games. I'm not saying everyone does that. And I'm sure there's people in very desperate situations. But I also think if you've got mental health issues, maybe being at home is worse for you. You want to be out, being productive and doing things.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And this is kind of what I was saying earlier. I don't honestly think there is a benefit system, not one that I've seen or heard of, that works really. Because on the one hand, as you say, you want to be able to look after the really poorest, those who are genuinely, as they say, vulnerable. Again, that's a word that I don't like using now, but we've had that, and over a few decades, it's grown to this monster that's easy to game. That, as you say, helps drug pushers, because they can just call themselves a victim, and suddenly they're having a great time. They've got their own house and they can operate their drug system there. This is the problem with benefits. So you've got, on the one hand, situations like you have in Africa and Asia, wherever, where you've got people on the streets, dying on the streets in some cases. That's something I've heard. And then here in the West, where people who are more than capable of working just never bother, because why should they? They're getting enough on benefits. It's not a great system either way.
Or even if they want to work, there might not be any jobs now because all the wealth creators are leaving and all the incentives are being destroyed. I mean, it purely sounds like a problem caused by politics and therefore can only be solved by politics.
I think so. And I think also that, there are people, and Steve Baker was one of them, who have tried to say, look, we've got to have these cuts. And they're immediately shut up. As I mentioned with France, they tried to make some cuts.
I admire it with the French, though.
I know.
Yeah, every small rule change that's burned down Paris.
Yes, burned down Paris,
I mean,
exactly.
It's part of their identity.
It is.
But I don't want it to be our identity.
No, exactly. And because ultimately it's not going to work. We've got 100% GDP, debt to GDP in this country, which is not good. In France, it's 112%. They're in a worse situation than us, and it's just going to get worse. America, it's 120%, and theirs is in trillions, their debt levels.
36.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? And Italy, it's 180% debt to GDP. And I don't know why we're not talking about this more. I mean, it's the debt payments are just about being covered, but they're going to get worse at some point. Well, they're already worse.
Well, so my friend Lynn Alden, she's like a economist, an analyst. She talks about 135% debt to GDP is the event horizon, where if you cross that, only one country hasn't defaulted, which was Japan, which went through decades of stagflation.
260% there.
Yeah, they've had a couple of crises in the last couple of years as well because of that. But once you cross that threshold, you don't come back.
No.
And the only way back is growth. And the only way to get growth, here we go. This is our debt clock, 2.7 trillion.
Oh, fabulous. Yes.
127%. But there was that other one where we saw the actual future liabilities. Who was it who talked about that? Where he talked about actually our liabilities take us to about 8 trillion.
Yes.
Ridiculous.
And that's basically the state pension, when future liabilities. And it's nowhere near as bad here as it is in Portugal, Spain, Italy, where their debt liability, their future liabilities, particularly with the state pension, are eye-watering, really. And again, they're retiring at 60. They've got much better payments than we have. And this is something I hear from my readers go, well, we've got the lowest payments, in Europe for state pension. And I'm like, yeah, but, look at their debt levels. That's why.
Well, Spain's just voted to work less. They've just approved the drop in the working week, I think, from 40 to 37 and a half hours.
Hilarious.
Which I laughed at because I'm like, I can't remember the last time I did a 40-hour week. I work 60, 70 hours a week. I work really hard to try and build a life. And also because the hurdle rate to get away from just being stuck on that hamster wheel is really hard. But I work really hard, and they're voting for less because they want to higher standard of living. It sounds great.
It sounds great.
I just don't think we're at a time where that's practical.
No, and particularly not Spain. I mean, already, it's not like they're killing themselves with work anywhere in Spain, as far as I can see.
Well, then I just hope. I don't think a political solution will come from the Labour Party,
no.
And I'm very doubtful of the Conservatives. They're in a whole load of mess. So all my hope has been directed now at reform and their promises, but I don't ever want to put my faith and trust in the political party, because even under the Conservative, the austerity, they tried a small amount of austerity. And by the way, somebody said, I can't remember who it was from the Conservative Party, said we should have cut much deeper. It was going to be unpopular anyway. We should have cut really deep.
Well, true.
And we missed our chance there. But reform will come out with policies over the next year or so, ready for an election in 4 years, and I'm hoping for some quite drastic cuts.
Well, yes, you can carry on hoping. I mean, the problem is, as we've been saying, when you try and cut and you say you're going to cut, nobody votes for you. And it's like turkeys voting for Christmas, really. Because
but they did in Argentina. Finally, Milei got through to
yes. Them. It may need to get... This is why I'm saying about,
Oh, don't.
may need to get a lot worse before people go, oh, all right, finally. But again, I like the idea of direct democracy, because ultimately, if it's like, when you run a business, if you say to your workers, okay, we can do this or we can do that, or what do you think? Then they say what they think, you do it. And if it doesn't work, you go, well, you said, who's going to be blamed? So I do think that we need to have far more referenda. We need to put the facts, the figures in front of people and go, this is the money we're getting. This is where it's having to be spent. We cannot cover this. You tell us where we cut. You tell us what to do with it. I would halve the NHS budget, because it's the wastage is unspeakable there, really. I mean, it's by far the biggest budget, 192. And so just by saying that, I would never be voted in.
You'd never be voted in.
No,
the NHS is...
Never ever. It is it's the religion. It is God, and the doctors are priests. And,
they will come out on their doorsteps and boo you.
They would, absolutely. So that's the problem, because I do genuinely think that, well, I know from, and I'm sure you do, everybody knows, doctors and consultants are going, the money they're spending on that. It could and should operate on half the budget it's currently got. And we need to take out a lot of corruption, a lot of people lining their pockets there, a lot of managers where you should have nurses, managers where you should have doctors, etc., etc. But yeah, I would never be voted in. So
I wish there's a chart I wish you could find. See if you can find this chart. It's one where they track the number of new clinicians versus administration staff within the health service.
Oh, I bet
it might have been the US health service either way, but I think it's probably comparable.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because it's a chart that tracks clinicians against administration staff. It's the most fascinating chart I've ever seen, because guess which one ratchets up over the years?
Yeah.
My mum was a nurse. She worked at the NHS. She was a brilliant nurse and worked in the children's ward. And she, over a period, just said it became unworkable.
Yeah.
Just more and more middle managers.
Exactly.
And she's like, no new nurses. And she said, we know what we're doing.
Yes, exactly. This is what I hear from mostly nurses. And they talk about the nurses who were on the wards become administrators and just sit in their office all day, pushing paper around. Whereas the actual nurses are running around like headless chickens, trying to get everything sorted. They need more nurses, far fewer administrators. And, I think everybody can see that. That's just basic. But everybody except whoever seems to be running the NHS seems to understand that.
I would privatise large parts of the NHS. I know they'll come at me with pitchforks.
Yes.
But the profit incentive is very important
I agree.
To drive, efficiency. And I'm not saying, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm not saying we should be, offloading the NHS to other rich people to manage to line their pockets like we have because I think we did a bad job with the water companies.
Yes.
But there are large parts that could be privatised to make it more efficient. There's other stupid things we could do. My dad lives in Ireland. If he has a doctor's appointment, every doctor's appointment is £50.
Oh, fair enough.
And there might be the odd exception, but maybe not. But he said it's quite easy to get a doctor's appointment in Ireland because of that. Where here in the UK, it takes weeks because our doctor's surgery are just full of people because they know they can go and
Exactly.
At any point to get an appointment.
And loads of people don't even turn up for their appointment, which I think is shocking. I think it's about 20%.
Here you go. This is the chart.
Scary.
So
yes.
explain it to people who are...
That's NHS.
Yeah, this is the NHS since 2013. So if you can't see the chart, we've got three measures here. One is nurses, which is basically from 2015 flatline. We have seen an increase in doctors.
Yes.
From 2015 to 2017.
But nothing like
on managers.
Unbelievable.
Managers
isn't it?
Accelerating. What a waste.
Absolutely. You see, I would slash and burn through the management level. Absolutely. And again, you know, I would have the pitchforks thrown at me. So how can you cut this? And if you're going, look, they're managers. They're doing nothing. They're wasting.
Isn't there some kind of limit on the number of doctors
Is there?
I think there's a limit. I think we set a limit on the number of doctors we train each year. I believe
silly.
so. Yeah, no, ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the thing is even though the number of doctors have gone up, everybody I speak to, they say, I was at the hospital. The main waiting time was for a doctor to come and see me, and some junior doctor comes in, they see me, and 4 hours I wait to see another one. And it seems to me there's lots of great nurses doing a great job, not enough doctors.
Capped at 7,500 to manage the cost of training.
It's capped.
I see.
So they capped the 7,500 doctors a year because of training. But if you removed a number of those managers...
Yes, you'd be able to do it.
All right, well, listen, it is a Wednesday. Leave us with some hope.
Yes,
let's finish with
absolutely.
some optimism, some hope. Tell me, what hope do you have for us?
Well, I do have hope with the youth of today. I genuinely do. I think that it's very interesting with particularly the Gen Zers. I think they've looked at their parents just spaffing their money away, just doing ridiculous things, and I've noticed that Gen Zers are not drinking. I'm a non-drinker, so I think good for you, not drinking. They're not interested in smoking. They are asking the hard questions, and they are being a lot more sensible with their money. They're interested for a start because they realise, I think, that they're not going to be looked after. So I am hopeful for the future. I have a number of Gen Z friends, and they are a lot more sensible than some of the ones of my age. So
I own a bar. The Gen Zers are pissing me off not drinking.
Oh, are they?
All right, Con, it's on you. It's on you and your buddies. How do you feel about that?
It's all your fault.
Yeah, great.
You're gonna
None of us can get a house still, but that's what it is.
You could get a house. You could get a house. He doesn't want to sell his Bitcoin. That's why.
Fair enough. Actually, I think you're right. Bitcoin's going to do better than property, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't be.
Any.
Yeah, if you had any.
If you hadn't been on that boat.
Which obviously you don't.
You damn fool. Thank you so much. Pleasure, it was so great to meet you. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be lovely.
Hopefully under better circumstances. And remind people of your website.
My website's moneymagpie.com, and it's full of information on everything to do with money, but particularly investing now. Great. Listen, go and learn about investing. Thank you for coming in. Thank you to everyone for listening. See you later.